Hi guys, I get a lot of questions about the transpose tool in Zbrush, so I figured I'll record a quick little tutorial. Transpose is a scary beast. It's nothing like you'd see in a traditional 3D application, and it's extremely multifunctional, which makes it confusing at first. But once you learn it, you'll love it. In this video, I'm gonna try to break down all transpose features into small, organized chunks and try to eliminate all fear and confusion you might have about it. Let's start with basics. Transpose is a line. It has a start point, a midpoint, and an end point. You can see I'm dragging it left and right. And the point where I click first will always be a start point. The point where you release is going to be your end point, and the circle in the middle is your midpoint. Your end point will snap to a surface you're dragging on. So if I'm dragging from here to there, you can see it snapped onto the surface. And same happens to the start point. It snaps to wherever I click. You can relocate them after the fact, and they will snap onto your surface, which is pretty handy. If you hold to shift while dragging your transpose tool, it will snap in a screen space. I'm gonna disable perspective, switch to orthographic, and you can see it snaps in a screen space. Now that we got the line out of the way, what about the circles, you'll ask me? Well, there's 6 freaking circles just on the line itself, plus additional lines and more circles and 1 extra circle, and that extra circle is white. And all the rest of the circles are colored, except this one isn't. It's just white, so you might ask why it's white. What's the meaning of life? There are a lot of questions, but no panic. We'll go over everything. So, outer circles are used to reposition transpose points. As you already seen, I can move my points around. If I click the midpoint, I can move their line. If you click on the line itself, you can reposition it as well. Similar to Photoshop, while dragging, you can press spacebar and you can reposition your transpose line. So let's say I want to rotate my cylinder, but I placed my initial pivot point in the wrong spot, so I can just press spacebar, and now when I rotate, it will rotate around this axis, around this pivot point. So now moving on to inner circles. Well, it gets a little bit more complicated here. Each inner circle does a different thing depending on its kind. So let's start with the rotate tool, because it's the simplest one. So with the rotate tool, the start and end points, they're used as basically handles to rotate around the opposite point. So if I click on this one, the pivot is going to be at here. Now if I click here, the pivot is going to be on this side. The middle point is extremely handy. If I drag my transpose line like this and I press and drag the midpoint, it will rotate my object and it will use transpose line as a rotation axis. And same happens here. See? This feature is extremely handy when you want to pose a character. So for example, let's grab this guy. If I go ahead and mask a part of the arm, I can drag my transpose line, and then I'm gonna move it inside of the geometry, roughly where the bone would be. And now if I adjust the middle, you can see I just rotated the arm. I can smooth the mask a bit. I can start quickly posing parts of the mesh. You can see my pivot was in a wrong spot. That's why I didn't do rotate well. So I'm moving pivot where the masking border is, and now it rotates. So move tool. Okay, so in a circle, the move endpoint will stretch the object. So if I, let's say, drag it like this, and I'm grabbing my endpoint, you can see it's stretching it. And you can hold shift to constrain the stretching into the direction of your transpose line. So let's say my transpose line is pointing that way, and if I hold shift while using the endpoint to stretch it, it stretches it into the direction of the transpose line. Midpoint of the transpose tool can be used to reposition the entire object. Extremely handy. Once again, you can use a shift to constrain the movement. So, as a quick example, let's just quickly squish it, and I'm gonna duplicate this object, and I'll move it in an arbitrary position. So now, if I want to move this cylinder into the area where this cylinder is, what I can do is I'll just drag from this one onto this cylinder, and now I'm just holding shift while dragging, and you can see it moves it exactly or almost exactly where the other guy is. Extremely handy. Alright, so let's see what else is available to us. So the inner circle of the start point is going to confuse you. If I press and drag it, what's happening? What is it? What it does, it flattens your mesh at an angle perpendicular to your transpose line. So let's say my transpose line faces that way, and it flattens it like this. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna quickly dynamesh the cylinder. Okay, so it's fairly dense and it's gonna be easier to see. So this feature is extremely handy when you're doing hard surface modeling and you need to quickly flatten a bunch of faces. So I'm just placing my transpose line, and I'm flattening it, and then you can use it in combination with the clip curve brushes. And you can see very quickly I can create interesting looking shapes. And then I can use a move squish to change the overall dimensions of my object. It's really handy to, I say really handy, look. It's useful when you want to quickly modify the overall proportions of the shape and cut some planes. Alright, so what's our next tool? Scale tool is similar to rotate. What it does, it uses the starting and end point as pivots. So if I drag like this, I can use my initial point as a pivot for my scaling, and the opposite, you can see if I place it move my pivot over here. It scales it that way. The middle circle is extremely handy with scale. What it does is it scales your object non-uniformly on two axes perpendicular to the angle of your transpose line. So if I place my transpose line like this and I hold shift to snap it to my screen space, you can see it scales it. Basically I can squish my object without scaling it upward. So sometimes when I want a very precise scaling or like non-uniform scaling, instead of using a scale tool, I will use my move and by modifying an endpoint, I can adjust it very, very precisely, like this, as opposed to using the scale tool. It offers a little bit more control. Alright, so these are the basics. Let's move on to secondary parts of transpose interface. Alright, so we're intermediate now. Let me grab a fresh cylinder. So tapping anywhere on your mesh will snap your transpose line. It will align it perpendicular to the normal of the point you're clicking on. RGB circles around the radiating from the start point of transpose are here just to help you orient the transpose line. So for example, I can just move it like this, all 360. And it's really handy when you wanna, like let's say, oriented it upward and then move it like this. Now, then there's this white circle. White circle is awesome. If you click on it, it's really hard to tell what's happening. It almost looks like nothing has happened. It's just points the transpose into our direction. But let's select a part of the mesh, and with the rest of the mesh hidden, I'm gonna click it again. And you can see it's kind of pointing into the direction of where majority of faces are. And let's try it again. Let's select this just top cap. Press it again. Oh, it pointed it straight up. So what the white circle does is it aligns your transpose line based on average normal angle of your selected faces. And it's extremely freaking useful. Or handy. Or whatever word you want to use. Because in hard surface modeling, you can just quickly make a selection which doesn't need to be anything particularly clean or precise, and then you can start, extruding stuff, and then maybe I want just these two faces, and I can do whoop, or I can align it like this, and I can and then start extruding, and you can see I have like a cylindrical form with a complicated extrusion with just a couple clicks. And then you can add the combination of the move thing and maybe move like this. No, direction. And yeah. So this is it about those secondary little circles. So let's move into some of the more advanced functionality. Like many other ZBrush features, it revolves around pressing Ctrl-Alt-Shift or a combination of them in a proper order to get a desired result. to a beginner, it might be a bit confusing, but once you try it a few times and keep trying it, after a while it will become embedded into your muscle memory. Like, you'll be able to do extremely complicated things really fast. Let's start with this one. So, control clicking and dragging your transpose circle in move or scale modes will duplicate your mesh. I drag my transpose and I'm just holding control and I'm dragging a circle. And you can see I can quickly duplicate a bunch of meshes. Now, if I do Control and Alt, it might look like nothing happened because I have my fill disabled. So let's enable our fill so you can see the polygroups. And I'm gonna do auto groups, so I can select one polygroup, and I'm clicking Alt and Control and dragging my middle circle. And you can see this mesh is white. So what this means is that it's a negative shape. So if I'm using Dynamesh, and I need to unmask Dynamesh, you can see this mesh is being subtracted from the other parts of this object. And this is awesome for hard surface stuff. You can see this can be already like a starting point for some sci-fi engine, something. So if you have your mesh masked, let's say like this. Then control clicking will extrude the unmasked parts out of your mesh. You can see that the loop in the middle. And if you press Control and Shift while doing that, it will constrain the movement to the direction of your transpose line. So if I Shift snap it vertically, and you can see I can extrude a bunch of faces like this, and then I can maybe, I'm using mask lasso, I can use a mask pen to mask a few faces, and then extrude some. And then you can see the faces that I extruded are flat, so I'm just gonna use move to flatten them. Yeah. Maybe I want to flatten this part as well. Just gonna grab move really quickly. So, what about masking? If I press Control and drag my transpose line, it will activate smart masking. And smart masking is really awesome. What it does, it detects the topological surface of the mesh, and it will mask according to that surface. So I can modify only certain parts of geometry without having to lasso or pen masking parts. This is extremely handy with characters when you're doing stuff like fingers, for example. So let's go back to our guy, and if I just Control drag with my transpose on, you can see I instantly just masked one finger. And now I can put my transpose line in place, move it in a bit, and I can rotate. Really useful. Now, if you do it in an opposite order, drag and then press Control while dragging the line, ZBrush will run direct transformation method, meaning that you can scale or move without having to release the transpose line. Typically, you would drag the line and then you would scale it, or in our, let's do like, then you move it. But if you start dragging and then you press and hold Control, you can move as you drag, and same with rotate, I believe. Yeah, you can just, it speeds up the process a bit. Now this mesh has polygroups, so if I grab my rotate tool and I click on a polygroup, you can see it masks only a specific polygroup. It's really useful when you, in cases like this, when you have specific body parts that are using a polygroup. So I can place it and then rotate it. In this mode, if I press on my geometry once again on the same polygroup, you can see it starts to blur my mask. And like, it doesn't have to be same polygroup, in fact, as long as you like not click in a dragon. And I'm being sloppy, I dragged my transpose line. So if you just keep clicking, it will smooth your mask. And if you control click on the empty space, it will inverse the mask. Same can be done in a draw mode as well. So if I go back here, and if I mask half of my piece and I press Control several times, it will smooth it out. Control click empty space will reverse the mask. Pressing Alt while using transpose line will activate a curve deformation mode, meaning you will only deform an area that is influenced by the point you're modifying. Let's demonstrate. So I dragged my transpose line, and now I'm Alt dragging, and you can see I'm not stretching the whole surface. I'm just stretching the area that's in the on the end. If I do the same for the midpoint, I'm modifying just the center. And same, well, not the same for in this case, because this guy will activate the flattening. For the scale though, you can flare and inflate the middle. You can see I'm dragging the endpoint, and it scales more the endpoint, and it leaves the start point untouched. And I can do the same for the start point. Just pressing and holding Alt while dragging the circle. Really quick way to create some interesting fall-offs. In case of with rotate, the Alt command is extremely helpful, because what it lets you do, you can let's say mask your area like this, and then you can place it, leave your endpoint in the area of the mask transition, and then when you press Alt, it's basically transforming it like a bone. Let me show it to you on a character example. So if I were to grab a leg, for example, and I'm just gonna quickly transpose it out. In this case, like, I don't have to place my transpose line inside of the leg. I can just do it like this, and it does a perfect job. And I can do other rotations. Sometimes in this complex area, the topology masking isn't doing too good of a job, so I have mask lasso here, and it lets me to do a more like a Photoshop style selection, where I can just do something like this, and then smooth out the mask, and then place my pivot point into the area of rotation, and I can rotate my bones like that. This method, the curve deformation method, is handy for things like this, for example. Let me mask my leg again. Where I can rotate just the central part of something. I mean, this is not anatomically correct, but it can be used to add an additional gesture to your pose. You can also use transpose functionality with insert mesh objects to quickly duplicate stuff along the surface of the object. To demonstrate this, I'm just gonna grab an insert brush and I'll pick, like, let's place some cones. And I'm gonna insert a cone, and you can see it automatically masks my the rest of my mesh. I'm gonna use rotate, and I'm gonna hold shift while I'm rotating to constrain it to like 15 degrees increments, and I'm gonna put it roughly on the surface of the mesh. And then let's say now I want to duplicate this object, so I can drag my transpose line like this, and then just Control Shift, and I'm duplicating it a bunch of times. Yeah, and I can also duplicate it and hold Alt. And now if I do Dynamesh, unmask and then do Dynamesh, you can see this object gets merged together, and I have some unions and some subtractions and some very weird subtractions. Alright, I think that's all the functionality I know of. If I missed a feature or two, make sure you comment on this video and let me know. For more awesome tips, assets, and tutorials, support me on my Patreon, Game Dev The Pipeline. Thank you.